You should have just left me and Sunka alone. I would have really remained silent, quiet, and gone, within manufactured dishonor and shame, as was the deal. Right, guys? Yes, Ahuel, Oanti Jaike. You just couldn't help yourselves, could you? And mercilessly, barbarously, continuing to spare me absolutely no quarter, and fiendishly destroying and bringing to complete fucking ruin my entire four quarts of perfectly good and refreshing, crisp chichihual in which I had been earnestly looking forward to enjoying that week. ¿Sabes qué? They say that arsenic does not have a taste or a smell. But if one has only eaten raw, unseasoned, unsalted, uncooked meat and raw milk and organs for over 6 years, arsenic does tend to leave a, curiously strong aluminum foil taste within one's mouth, and a slightly garlic smell to one's breath after only a few cups, which seemed to have been more than enough to leave me bedridden for 3 months with that, distasteful hepatotoxicity and a constellation of disagreeable accompanying symptoms that I am sure you were under the assumption was going to take my wind for good this time. Either way, you have deprived my chichihualayo hashit, the prestige of its alabaster oleaginous resplendence, and my upper lip of its ivory aqueous brocha. And that was strike 3, and simply unforgivable. Tijita, us poor desert folk out here have very little comforts within this harsh and humble life. Ijuan ipampa inin, ashkan janotlatol jahui. And this is what happens now. The event on May 11th of 2021 that brought my, meteoric rise onto the world stage to an immediate end and left me, what is the words? Slowly asphyxiating to death from blood loss in a pool of my own blood for my mortal wound in which I had sustained to my right leg was not a self-imposed injury, nor was it an accidental injury, like what had to be told to the emergency paramedic services and the public back in 2021 to guarantee the safety of my loved ones. Well, now that that is out of the way, my friends, and my fate has now been officially sealed, I might as well take the opportunity to get a few more things off of my pecho, since we're all already here, right? And take the opportunity to speak candidly to some of the individuals whom have been unwilling to speak to me or with me in a private setting for the past almost 4 years, yet whom have seemed to have had quite a lot to say about myself during the same time period. Behind my back, to the public, to law enforcement, while at the very same time, behind the scenes in the realm of reality, doing absolutely everything within their faculties to avoid having to actually meet me in person for a simple face-to-face conversation, whom I'm sure are more than likely feeling awfully nervous right about now about what I may say or what I may show. And more than likely, depending on whom you are, very rightfully so. Please forgive me for sharing this, Raphael, but I give you my word that this will be the only documentation of our private discourses in which I'll be sharing with the public. But I digress. Hey Gil, quote unquote, the American Cholo. Hey Spider. Hey Marvelous. Hey Mr.Criminal. Hey Kiahuit. Hey Tony A. Can you please explain to the public exactly why it is that you self-proclaimed real ones have not been willing to speak with me personally or see me in person throughout all of these years, so that you may have had the opportunity to tell me face to face what you had felt comfortable saying about me to the public on your platforms? And Lucky, I apologize, but I as well give you my word that these screenshots sent to me by my dear and beloved friend Sunka will be the only private discourses with either of us that will be shared with the public. And for those watching, please take your time to pause, rewind, screenshot, read, and reread, and do whatever else one must do to properly witness, digest, and assimilate the information and the authentic, unspoken inner insight of this situation that is being revealed here. So, Marvelous, Gil, Mr.Criminal, Kiawit, Tony A, Spider, what seems to be the problem here? Can you please explain to the public and myself why exactly you're not willing to accept any of these terms or any of these offers, or meet me face to face and show myself and the public whom you really are behind your hollow words, internet gossip, cell soldiering, and Mickey Mouse poop butt klecha? I'm sure that the public and your own communities and fan base would love to hear your reasonings now that they are informed of your true nature behind the scenes, off of the internet, in the realm of reality. As well, I'm dying to know, Moneki nichmati ini, ma tinetzlatos. Have you enjoyed your 4 years of fame? Marvelous. Kiawit. How did it feel going from 3,000 followers all the way to 165,000 followers nearly overnight, and becoming a, how you say, niche TikTok and Instagram community celebrity and internet cultural icon, and I guess you would say educator? Kiawit. Was it all like you had dreamed it would be? Did it fill the all-pervading inanition within you, my beloved reflection? I pray that you did not abuse that power, influence, and lofty station of yours, and do something like your neuromelanated Judeo-Christian friend, Marvelous Inc., or something quite possibly revealing, like use your self-proclaimed Nahuatl language and cultural education platforms and station and influence within the very same communities you purport to belong to and protect from predatory frauds like myself to advertise your Hinge dating profile to your six-figure TikTok and Instagram fan base, which is largely made up of teenage girls and vulnerable women from our own communities? Or like something really creepy, like publicly soliciting your 165,000 TikTok and Instagram followers, which, once again, is largely made up of teenage girls and vulnerable women from our own communities for arranged marriages with yourself? Because, tú sabes, intla ye otich aich inonke. That could possibly come off to some, not to all, maybe not to very many, but bear with me here, Kiahuit. To some, it may just come off like perhaps somebody, somebody, let us just say, may or may not have a problem with projecting one's own shortcomings and one's own secret shame, suppressed guilt, hidden desires, suppressed sexual perverse behaviors, racism, colorism, sexism, imposter syndrome, fraud guilt, and self-hatred onto others. Shichiwa chikwalis ashkan kiawit. Shichiwa chikwalis. Marvelous. My poor, beloved, Serapis Christos, Bacchus-worshipping wayward son. How did you enjoy your collaboration with viral YouTube celebrity Peter Santinello and Huda YouTube powerhouse Snitch I Wills TV? And the overnight fame and lofty station of an internationally known niche YouTube community celebrity and internet culture icon? Was it all in which you had expected it to be, reflection? Was it all in which you had dreamed? Was it worth the ramifications that your mind, your body, your spirit, and your soul are currently experiencing? Did the fame, the recognition, the clout, the fan base, the manufactured respeto, the typhoons of fake love coming from complete strangers, the attention, the manufactured prestige, the endless sexual escapades and hedonistic Christian motel sexual debauchery fill the void within yourself in the way or to the degree in which you were led to believe that they would? Or perhaps did the one whom you serve mislead and bind you within the posach ayahuit of your unbridled envy, longing, and debased sexual desires. Marvelous. Did having unprotected sex with Romelo during a, 3-day, very fitting, Babylonian, Bacchic motel extravaganza among the Techpintin, during the exact same time period that you were diligently and selflessly, may I dare add, doing your Heavenly Father God, Yahweh's righteous, laistic work by consummating your passionate and Talmudically kosher sexual relationship with one of your 16-year-old girlfriends in which you had appropriated from your own child, if I understand correctly, while simultaneously, during the exact same time period that you and this very same woman, Romelo, were publicly claiming that she was the victim of my own sexual grooming and my own sexual misconduct and perversion, and on top of that, that I had attempted to recruit her into my, let me make sure I get this straight, my snake-worshipping, sex trafficking, pedophilic, white supremacist sex cult, that I was the criminally insane, wealthy, schizophrenic, Anglo-Saxon, Manson-esque leader of. They're doing all of these things, marvelous. Simultaneously, may I add the listening audience, simultaneously, fucking A. They're doing these things, marvelous. Satiate your ego and finally end your ceaseless and ravenous longing. Did they complete you? Reflection. Or did doing these things mark one's soul with the seal of Te Popo Loante Ursin and make one's teeth fall out of one's head? I guess we will never know. Now remind those still listening that this Romelo is the very same Romelo whom was one of the two women whose screenshotted texts are featured within the same video that I had made back in 2021, before I was soon after banned from IG for addressing the fraudulent allegations that had been made against me publicly by these same two women whom were both working behind the scenes directly with the third self-proclaimed victim of my make-believe, snake-worshipping, white supremacist, sex-trafficking sex cult, whom, in actuality, was the very same digital marketing coordinator named Angela Morell for the very same PR firm named Room 214, whom had been collaborating behind the scenes the whole time with social media and YouTube influencers and TikTokers, Marvelous Inc., Kiahuit, Frey the Great, Gil, whom refers to himself in the third person online as quote-unquote the American Cholo, the human vermin and undercover Puelco who runs Cinemills TV, Mr.Criminal, Tony A from Rhodium Radio, and an online, niche specific proverbial who's who of seemingly boundless and never-ending hordes of agent provocateurs and poop butt ignorant, clout-thirsty, opportunistic online prison broadcasters, and Mickey Mouse non-traditional, non-language speaking, pan-Indian online social media activists, YouTube and internet personalities and influencers. I as well would like to remind the listening audience that Romelo was as well the very same person whom I had exposed back in 2021 for fiendishly attempting to grant and approve herself an invitation to a visit and a multiple-week stay at my home and my land, and then claiming publicly that it was I, in fact, who was coercing and grooming her to travel to me so that I could coerce and groom her into sexual intimacy and ultimately into membership within an imaginary sex cult and sex trafficking operation that I must have been running out of my off-grid 1970s 80 square foot travel trailer in the middle of the harsh high desert lands with no running water, no toilet, and a basic 4-panel solar system that I had recently upgraded to. Now, do not get me wrong, I am not sure of the specific logistics, requirements, and basic entry-level industry standards for owning and operating an actual international snake-worshipping, sex trafficking, pedophilic, white supremacist sex cult operation. But if I had to guess, my circumstance more than likely would have been found lacking, Romelo. This is as well the very same person whom during our over a year or two of direct communication and interactions was not able to coerce me into agreeing to have any form of sexual intimacy with her, despite her seemingly and suspiciously, may I add, endless and constant, brazen, abrasive and coercive attempts to try to get me to agree to do so. Chichia. Now that I look back, Romelo, this peculiar, overt, sexually aggressive behavior directed towards myself would not happen to have anything to do with your bills being paid and you being employed by a World Economic Forum partnered Sierra Club sponsored international liberal NGO at the time. What is it? A young 30-something-year-old, spray-tanned, nails did, Melanesian or Micronesian, I cannot remember, Kardashian-esque, hypersexually aggressive, liberal NGO social media correspondent from the Netherlands, whom occasionally likes to play dress-up as a cholita, under the guise and mask of a caring friend and supporter of the movimento, wanting to do a story for her network, invites herself to the land and home of a young, radical, rising, influential figure within the public eye, whom was sharing hidden, stolen, and systematically suppressed truths to the world, which was bringing about healing, reconciliation, reunification, and re-empowerment for his community and many others, and then attempting to overtly sexually compromise the same individual for either blackmail or clandestine corporate or political control, or if that endeavor failed, then for public tar and feathering, for social and legal persecution and prosecution, for sexual misconduct, rape, lover boy grooming, being the leader of a sex cult, pedophilia, and even international human sex trafficking, which would, at some point, obviously lead to false imprisonment, bad charges, a bad jacket, leading to a seemingly calculated and expected death, which would then be reported to have come from the very hands and members of his own ethnic diasporic minority group, whom would then be blamed and take the fall for the crescendo of this little psyop, which would immediately neutralize everything done or accomplished by this individual and seal the fate of the very same diaspora whom the colonial and corporate superpowers wishes to snuff out the very last ember of. Nah, that sounds way too out there. Right, Rome? I mean, you had said yourself that you were my friend and that you loved me and that you, quote, don't know these women, unquote, and, quote, am not in any collective, and unquote. So there is no way that you ever could have been involved in something like that. Right, Rome? Although, I will remind you that I am currently in possession of all of our text communication, both on SMS, Signal, and Instagram, in video recorder format from our very first conversation, which began, if you do not remember, by you reaching out to me as a social media correspondent for Indigenous Peoples Movement, wanting to interview me for a network, to our very last messages and texts. Same with you, Jennifer Joseph. You should have done the right thing, Romelo and Jennifer. You should have told the world the truth about the true nature of our interactions and conversations. And you should have told the truth about the actual effects in which you were experiencing while you were in communication with me and while you were following, at least what you claimed, following the traditional dietary protocols in which you had both, upon your own free will, inquired about, which I will remind you both, I have quite the extensive and expansive screenshot collection of. And more importantly, you should have told the truth about how I live and where I live. That was both very cruel and very petty. And lastly, you should have told the world what was done to me in that hospital. Jennifer, I know that you were quietly, secretly listening in on Rome's line when she was on the phone with me for those long 2 hours during my very first long standoff and negotiations with the security and raid team outside of my high security COVID-19 quarantine hospital room, which would have meant that you must have secretly overheard that embarrassing and real, vulnerable moment when I was warning the door kick team's team leader, point man, and impromptu negotiator in the hallway about ever disrespecting me again by attempting a breach on my room, by not only stacking weak side, but as well in a unified low-ready entry formation. I know that must have been hard for you to hear. Yes, I must admit, even heavily drugged, exhausted from marathon torture and ritualistic sexual humiliation and mental driving, with all of those wound drains hanging out of my leg, a tube attaching my right leg's wound to a vacuum wound pump machine, and all those new fresh surgical wounds to my leg and being unable to walk and all of that, I embarrassingly and admittedly seem to have had, at the moment, still felt very impassioned, fervent, zealous, dare I say, that I had deserved the golden standard, the proverbial Jeffrey Gordon of high speed, high efficiency, colonial urban military violence technologies, a clean, tight, single stack, strong side, unified, high ready, dynamic entry with absolutely no MDVs, no careless, flagrant heel flagging, showing absolute and complete reckless disregard for professionalism, the moment at hand, and the very safety and lives of one's teammates. If you guys were wondering, I did not receive the single stack, strong side, high ready, dynamic entry in which I was yearning for that evening. I thought that you were my friends. I trusted you, Rome, Jennifer. Speaking of friends, hey Rome, why did Angela, Jennifer, you, and Marvelous not release all of those hours worth of audio recordings that Angela had worked so hard to organize and secretly record me on the other side of the hospital phone line during those secret group calls that Angela had talked all of you into aiding and abetting her with? Was it not the plan to leak those secret audio recordings to the public while I was still in the hospital? Did I not do a good enough job? Was I not enunciating my words? Was I lacking charisma? Or, perhaps, did Angela and her people not believe that these secretly recorded audio recordings, if released to the public, even if heavily edited and abridged, would or could stand up to public scrutiny or sound uncoaxed or in a manner that a listening audience would not become immediately suspicious of the very nature of the circumstances or context that these conversations were recorded under? Was it all of that annoying hyperventilating, going in and out of consciousness? Was it the slurred speech that I was doing? Or perhaps was it all of that other stuff that I was not supposed to talk about during those little exercises that kept slipping out, like describing in great detail what was being done to me while I was naked with both of my arms dislocated at the shoulders and bound in 5-point restraints in those modification rooms? The violent sexual humiliation and abuse, the ritualistic marathon torture during open surgeries without any sedatives or painkillers of any type, the ketamine drip, those giant and assorted-sized circular-shaped blinding flashing lights. I mean, all that crying and asking for help and all that bitching and moaning, right? I mean, come on, what a fucking loser. I probably, regrettably, really ruined some great audio, huh? Lo siento, Angela. I apologize for that. Yes, I am sure that you could have still cut and cropped and edited and added to take what you had and made it into some type of useful content for the cancel campaign, right? Because there's some really great content in there, and we all had worked so very hard on that. I mean, how long exactly did it take for them to finally break me and induce madness in those modification rooms until I was playing ball? A week, week and a half, 2 weeks, 3? I cannot remember. And how many times did you guys have to take turns hosting those secret group calls to ask the very same set of questions over and over until I did it right? Or at least until I did it good enough to be finally moved back up into the ICE unit upstairs. For the life of me, I cannot recall if it was 6 times or 6 million. You see, I learned during my time in those modification rooms that when one is deep within what I believe the colloquial term is a K-hole, time becomes stuck on a never-ending loop, and in the right environment and under the proper set of controls, one can be forced to experience on an endless and never-ending loop a very particular set or algorithm of, let us just say, very extreme, physically, emotionally, and psychologically jarring and distressing sets of stimuli or experiences for a literal perceivable eternity, all within the physical time frame of only a few hours. Pretty wicked, huh, Angela? Another question you may be able to help me with, Angela. How exactly did you get to UNM Hospital in less than 2 hours before anyone else could, when you both live and work in Phoenix, Arizona, which would have been at least a 7-hour drive to UNM Hospital, the very same hospital that my lifeless body had been emergency airlifted to? Unless you were, for some coincidental reason, let us just say, not in Phoenix on that fateful day of May 11th, but were in fact already nearby on the very same day and the very same time frame when what happened to me happened. It is almost like there was a little flat-footed Zuni bluebird right there with you, Ipan Tlajomonajas, telling you exactly when and what was about to happen to me on that fateful day of May 11th, 2021. I guess we'll never know. But because you were coincidentally so close during the time of what happened to me, this allowed you to be able to be the very first person to get to the hospital after my med flight helicopter had arrived at UNM to, fraudulently sign paperwork at the hospital claiming to be my biological sister, claimed that I am schizophrenic and that you were my caretaker and sole emergency contact, so that my actual friends and my actual family, including Sunka, were not able to speak to me or know what was going on with me within that hospital, or know where I was being held, or have the chance to help me unless it was organized through yourself. What was that about, Angela? A little oddly forward, do you not think? Another quick question that maybe you or your handlers can help me with. After being airlifted to UNM's emergency treatment center for a mortal leg wound and after dying and being resuscitated multiple times while receiving 48 to 72 hours of blood transfusions and back-to-back emergency surgeries, why did I awaken, intubated, bound in 5-point restraints, under high-security quarantine measures, in a newly established impromptu military and PMC-staffed COVID-19 quarantine FOB section of UNM Hospital with U.S. military and private security contractors on guard in the hallways outside of my room? What was that about, guys? A little overkill for one who was in my condition, do you not think? And to the doctors who were present within that, very particular modification room that I was sent to after my second little hiccup on the phone. In particular to the gentleman whom was standing near my right lower leg, whom had his gloved thumb second knuckle deep within my right calf muscle from my freshly reopened surgical fasciotomy, whom kept stopping the Bacchic fun and games to voice his sneaking suspicion, worry, and creeping fear due to the frequent irregularities being seen on my EKG monitor, that perhaps, somehow, I was only acting like I was still paralyzed and unable to move, and that I was only acting like I was still unresponsive and deep within my K-hole, while you decadent Philistines, you fiendishly took part in the guilty pleasures of your Halle. No, I am not, as you feared, quote, a possibly great fucking actor, unquote. But yes, your sneaking suspicions and fears had been correct all along. I was, in fact, only pretending to still be paralyzed and unresponsive, imperceptive, and deep within the mire of that K-hole during all of that. And yes, just as all of you were fearing, I am and was fully aware of everything that was being done to me, while everyone in that room believed me to be incapable of. And I had heard and still remember each and every single word that was spoken in that room from the very moment you all shuffled in, one after another. I will admit, though, there were a few times where my awareness did actually leave my body during the, Dionysian festivities, and watched you all with my body from the corner of the room ceiling near the door for perhaps a few minutes, a few times, more than likely due to being kept in a prolonged state of shock for so long, so many times that week. So I cannot credit my stellar performance solely to my own discipline and my own ironclad resolve to escape your wretched hands. I seem to have had a little help that evening. And to that young Dene brother, the only one in the hallway clad in that set of civilian blue scrubs, whom looked like he was somewhere in which he did not belong, with the long single braid whom I had made contact with while I was in that hallway after fighting to escape that room, with wide open surgical wounds and on one leg. When we had made eye contact, you had your hands covering your face as you wept loudly, and tears streamed down your fingertips. Did they tell you what they were doing to me in those rooms, Reflection? Did you know? Or did you perhaps hear what they were doing to me? Or was it simply what you had witnessed the PMCs and military security doing to me in that hallway, coupled with my manic and blood-curdling screams for someone to please help me, to please not let them do this to me again, pleading for someone to do something, please. Did they tell you what you witnessed in the hallway was simply the end result of a violent, schizophrenic, low-life gang member having yet another belligerent, schizophrenic episode and assaulting staff and security once again for no logical or apparent reason? Did you believe them? Or did you know within your heart that that was a lie? Timati se sepa, within the mire of my sleepless nights for the past 4 years, I have pondered these types of questions. And to the gentleman whom had made the comment about my testicles while my male genitalia was cradled within his hands, what was the word that you had used again to describe my shaven huevos? Did it happen to begin with a C and end with an E? You lot are some real fucking strange birds, you know that? How many times and how many people exactly have you done this to? Did they all attempt to rip the AC exhaust out from the wall or break the impact-resistant windows to attempt to jump out of the 3rd, 4th, or 5th story to a certain death to escape your depravity and wicked hands like myself? With perhaps the use of both of their legs, were they ever successful? You all had seemed very comfortable and very relaxed in there, as if you had done it 1,000 times. Well, up until the very end at least. And to the spook who was standing on the left side of the mobile gatch bed that I was restrained to, whom was standing by my left upper arm with the freckles and the red hair, the red beard and the big goofy glasses, whom for some reason just kept insisting that he gets to be the one whom inserts the needle once again into my left arm to withdraw the blood from me, when my body, according to the machines that I was hooked up to, showed that it had reached the desired state of prolonged and sustained shock, peak pain, discomfort, and critical fear to, what was the term you guys were using? Stimulate and milk the adrenal and pineal glands? What does that mean, guys? If you remember correctly, your mask had came off of you during our little scuffle at the end. Oopsie. And just in case, if anyone who was in that very particular modification room that evening may be still wondering what exactly had triggered that huge adrenaline and heart rate spike on the monitor and caused me to completely break my gimmick, my restraints, and then proceed to leap out of the mobile gatch bed that I was restrained to, and then on one leg and with fresh and wide open surgical wounds, proceed to then fight all of you within that very same room to make it out of that room and as far as into the hallways, where I would then have to defend myself from a literal hallway full of military and PMC security guards whom had come rushing from either sides of the hallways of that wing to tackle me to the ground and begin stomping on my head, my neck, my genitalia, and the same very leg with the fresh and wide open surgical wounds and with the full body weight of several full-grown men, with their feet on the back of my leg, with the wide open surgical wounds, the side of my neck and elbows, and with the help of the sedative shot to my butt cheek to render me unconscious and put me in restraints once again. The cause for that particular response was the peculiar phrase in which was uttered by the gentleman who was standing by my feet, while the middle-aged, fair-skinned, Levantine-looking woman who was standing by my right side's upper arm with the very thick, beautiful, long black single braid running down her back, who was now holding that large, heavy-looking, metallic, tubular-shaped handheld device that she had wrapped in layers of gauze and medical tape that had a noticeably large button on it with a thick black wire coming out of the back end that she now had within her hands and had begun to move directly over my chest, while this gentleman who was standing by my right lower leg said, and I'll never forget these words, he said, and I quote, "Why don't we just do him like how we did Trudeau?" Why don't we just do him like how we did Trudeau? What exactly did he mean by that, guys? Forgive me if I may have possibly misunderstood the context of this gentleman's statement. But the reason for my possibly seeming random response was that I once had an acquaintance whom I had met through a mutual friend more than a decade and a half ago, coincidentally named John Trudeau, whom was once upon a time, in his younger years, an indigenous political activist, poet, and revolutionary figure similar to myself. Before his pregnant wife and all three of their young children, ages 5, 3, and 1 year old, were bound and burned alive until death within their family home. Just 24 hours after John had burned an American flag on the steps of the FBI building in Washington, D.C. Now, I understand that there is a chance that your statement may have had absolutely nothing to do with my acquaintance John Trudeau's passing in 2015, or the binding and immolation of his pregnant wife and their 3 young children, ages 5, 3, and 1 year old, and their family home. Maybe I was just being a little paranoid and looking too much into that statement. But one must understand, after a week or two of being strung out on a plethora of mind-altering drugs, while undergoing marathon torture, endless rounds of what I now understand to be called mental driving, the modification rooms, the violent sexual abuse and ritualistic sexual humiliation, and all of those really groovy recorded group call sessions with that digital marketing coordinator from the PR firm Room 214. I know this may sound crazy, but bear with me here. I thought that maybe you guys were thinking about making the call to have the innocent woman and family member of mine who witnessed what actually happened on May 11th, bound and burnt alive within her own home, right after you guys had stopped my heart temporarily with that device that was being held over my chest, pronounced me dead, gave me a false time of death, and then harvested the appendages, glands, and organs of my body in which that gentleman in the hallway on his cell phone seemed to be speaking about. So that is why you guys got that startling and seemingly random or abrupt and extreme response from me towards the end there, if you guys were all still curious. Oh, and UNM, whomever was in charge of monitoring the security footage down in the COVID-19 quarantine ward back in 2021, you may want to make sure to erase any of the footage from when I had managed to get out of those rooms and escaped into the hallways. Same with those room raids and the long standoffs, even the ones in the ICE unit. Because if any of that footage ever does seem to make the light of day, some people may begin to question the motivating factors that would have led a patient within my condition to strive so ardently to escape from UNM hospital and spend 9 days on the run, so to speak, with wide open surgical wounds and no painkillers, blood thinners, or medication of any sort, if what I am saying is not true. And if you wish to doubtlessly and presumably claim that I am a simply lying, schizophrenic lowlife, because, I mean, look at me, right? There was blood, hair follicle, saliva, and urine samples taken from me less than 6 hours after I was helped to escape the hospital, while I was going in and out of consciousness, that were all tested and ran a myriad of full drug test panels on by an independent lab. And there was footage and there are witnesses, which will all be released to the public, if anything does happen to Sunka, as was promised to me if I ever went public with this. As well, there was a gentleman in a red hat and a red shirt whom had witnessed me on one leg with a walker hopping out of the hospital doors at breakneck speed towards the street in a state of full hysteria, yelling and crying and waving my arms, who witnessed my state as I, in tears and hysterically crying, pleaded to use his phone, because my getaway ride had just turned the wrong way, and both security and the police were already on their way. To that gentleman, do you remember my first words to you when you asked if I needed help? I believe they were, please, I'm not crazy. I'm not a tejato. I'm an indigenous political activist. Search Plaja by Tepo Sweetpeel or Ironjacket on Instagram on your phone. That is me. I am not crazy. They have kept me drugged and have been torturing me for weeks or possibly months. And they are going to kill me. Can I please use your phone? The cops are coming. You searched me up on IG on your phone. And then you let me borrow your phone. And then when my ride arrived, a minute or two later, you selflessly helped me throw the walker that I was using into the back seat or the bed of the truck. I cannot remember which one. Oh, and all of that will be on your security cameras as well, UNM. So make sure that that footage is mysteriously and coincidentally misplaced as well, guys. But if you see this, please reach out to me. Tell me what I was wearing when you saw me so that I know that it is really you. I would like to thank you. Your kindness, courage, and trust in a complete stranger during that, I know, what must have been a chaotic, off-putting, uncomfortable, and brief interaction saved my life that day. If you see this, I as well give you my full permission to make a video describing what you had heard and what you had saw that day, and what it was that I had said to you during our brief encounter, and tag me in it. As well, any of the courageous and selfless and righteous individuals at UNM whom during my first stay had tried to help me, and for those in particular whom helped organize and coordinate my escape with Sunka on the outside, please reach out. Do not be a stranger. I give you my full permission to contact me. I would love to speak with you. I have a few questions and a few things that I would like to share with you. I remember every single one of you. Marvelous. Kiawit, Frey the Great, Gil, quote unquote, the American Cholo, Tony A, Mr.Criminal, Spider, Zero Elva, and every other opportunistic, cultureless, classless, honorless, poop-butt social media influencer, prison broadcaster, and shameless, clout-thirsty internet personality whom have been contacted by or worked with the digital marketing coordinator, Angela Morel, from the PR firm Room 214, or who simply joined in on the fun to exploit the algorithm for one's own personal, social, or monetary benefit. You have all aided in a state-sponsored cultural influence campaign whose primary goal was to bring an immediate halt to the production of the 3-hour full feature-length Cholowani documentary film that had just begun pre-production in 2021, and to publicly and internationally discredit, invalidate, neutralize, censor, and suppress the authentic voices, the authentic information, the true knowledge, and the proof of our authentic diaspora's original movemento's true history, true ancient roots, and purpose, and to destroy, completely fucking destroy, more than a decade worth of sacrifice and trabajo in international court and established and working relationships with other foreign diplomats whom were at the time willing to sponsor our cause in international court in getting the authentic and original Cholowani diaspora and respective foundational third, fourth, and fifth generational Cholowani neighborhoods and barrios and communities and families rightfully internationally recognized in international human rights court and in the international community as an authentic, ancient, indigenous, genetic, cultural, linguistic, and religious diasporic minority that has survived multiple illegal foreign European military occupations and a multitude of ongoing attempted state-sponsored genocides and systemic and systematic waves of ethnic cleansing campaigns, including the most current stream of chapters of U.S. genocide campaigns against our diaspora that began officially in the 19th century with the passing of the 1855 Greaser Act, which, understand, would have removed the members of our authentic and original genetic, cultural, linguistic, and religious diasporic minority, communities, and neighborhoods and its descendants out from under the classification and jurisdiction of Criminal Code 186.22 and protected our diaspora from continuing to fall a victim to and remain at the mercy of a multitude of immoral, unconstitutional, inhumane, and unlawful RICO, organized crime, gang, and terrorist sentencing enhancements and standalone charges, which have been systematically misused and weaponized in America's corrupt and unlawful colonial court systems to chronically overstep and habitually and brazenly violate a constellation of cardinal or fundamental constitutional and basic international human rights for the sole intention or purpose of completing a centuries-old campaign of ethnic cleansing and genocide against our diaspora and ethnic minority. And this would have allowed the possibility for our legal teams to petition to open up for re-review all unlawful OCCA and RICO and gang-related or gang-enhanced cases against our authentic diaspora, neighborhoods, communities, warriors, and spiritual and community leaders, which would have given us the opportunity to take the U.S. to International Human Rights Court and file and petition for the immediate release of the innocent and unlawfully convicted and wrongfully detained men and women of our diaspora whom are currently being held captive as POWs and suffering daily human rights violations within the concrete tombs and secret prisons within America's corrupt penal system, whom are being held in maximum security, 24-hour solitary confinement, security housing unit, special administrative measures for decades as POWs, solely and only on unlawful and corrupt OCCA and RICO charges and organized crime, terrorist or gang enhancements, which would have catalyzed mass prison reform regarding our diaspora and would have given international recognition and protection for our communities and our youth, both on the streets and within America's corrupt and genocidal colonial court systems, prisons, and youth detention centers, and made possible and expedited the immediate instatement of rights for our diaspora, including but not limited to access to competent and non-compromised non-state agent legal representation, the reinstatement of our diaspora's right to fair, unbiased, and speedy trials, and a jury of our own peers, and our legal proceedings being under the close watch and scrutiny of International Human Rights Court observers and being subject to International Human Rights Court laws and intervention, and religious dietary rights similar to the halal and kosher religious dietary rights afforded to Muslim and Jewish inmates, and granted immediate qualification for Religious Freedom Act rights, which would equate to authentic members of the Cholo diaspora receiving a mandatory number of hours spent barefoot on bare earth beneath the sunlight each day for prayer in accordance with our basic, ancient, and original, authentic, traditional spiritual practices and customary religious protocols. And finally, granting our diaspora uninhibited access to our own chaplains and our own authentic, traditional, religious, historical, spiritual texts and literature in state, federal, and private prisons and county jails, and an open line of communication and influence from our own diaspora's traditional land-based wisdom keepers or spiritual or religious leaders and healers. You shameless, Ashkwal Tlatoanque, as well, brought an immediate end to the Back to the Land Cultural and Language Immersion Program. Just a few weeks before the first group of men from Homeboy Industries were set to come up to stay on my land for a week for the pre-launch trial run of the Back to the Land Cultural and Language Immersion Program, in which I was in the preliminary works of launching with the help of 3 representatives from Homeboy Industries named Jose, Richard, and Fidel. Tichmati Akin Ticha, Jose, Richard, Fidel. To give the inner city populations of our diaspora access to our ancestral lands, authentic history, language, traditional customs, lifeways, skills, ancient and original empowering and healing dietary practices, wisdom, spirituality, and the overall circumstance necessary and required for homies, convicts, and traditional cholo whom have been fraudulently mislabeled as gang members, violent offenders, and terrorists within illegally colonial occupied territory, whom will not or cannot fit into the soul, mind, and body rendering, abominable, profane station of living as an indentured servant and co-collaborator for a demonic, Ahrimanic, Luciferian, Freemasonic, blood-drunk, self-destructive, ecocidal, genocidal, wicked, unnaturalized, illegal, foreign military colonial occupation that is subsidized and controlled by a handful of criminally insane, inbred, archonically possessed, genocidal, demiurge worshipping nepotist pedophiles, and instead be given both the option and the capability to be able to choose for themselves and their families, barrios, and communities if they would rather live a semi-subsistence life off-grid and on the land outside of the colony cities and within the Most High's intended natural matrix, free and left alone, where our people may finally have both the correct environment, circumstance, and correct influences to begin to heal and reconnect with themselves, each other, our own original, inherent, ancestral, and natural circumstance, where Creator had originally made and left our people to be consecrated by, so that we may be completed and thus competent and able to easily fulfill our original, true, and sacred respective incarnative functions and purposes, without molestation or inhibition, and without constant foreign illegally occupying Luciferian colonial government interference, and without the constant threat of our diaspora and our children continuing to be pan-generationally, systemically, and systematically targeted, murdered, indoctrinated, criminalized, stolen, deracinated, traumatized, broken, and harvested and sacrificed en masse by state, federal, and local social services and law enforcement agencies to generate, stimulate, and sustain annual federal, state, county revenue and corporate profit margins within these sectors of social services, criminal justice, and law enforcement, and the federal, state, county, and private prison industrial complex and or related industries. All of you out there who were involved in the state-sponsored, digital marketing firm curated, smear campaign and psyop against myself and the righteous Choloani movemento. You all helped steal that salvation and that protection from the hands of tens of thousands of the actual individuals, neighborhoods, families, and communities that are a part of our actual, authentic, diasporic minority whom are in desperate need of that support, that global attention, that ayuda, that second chance, that hand up, that light, and that protection from this criminally insane and fucking genocidal country's government and its Luciferian, Ahrimanic, and genocidal agendas. These things were among just a few in which I had been arduously at task in fulfilling, that if not brought to complete ruin with your help, beginning in 2021, that we're going to completely change tens of thousands of lives and completely disrupt the final solution of the CIA and DOD's cultural influence operations manufactured descending trajectory for our communities and our youth's fate, and bring about our collective's realignment, reconciliation, restoration, reunification, healing, reconnection, re-empowerment, and salvation in just one generation. Just one generation. But that dream is over now. Where you have selfishly and ignorantly aided and abetted the state in accomplishing can never be undone. For it is too late now. This age's end will soon be at hand, for there is no time left. And when the devils show up at your front door and come for you and your families like they have come for mine and my peers, there will be nothing that I nor the great mystery can do for you. And you're going to have to live and leave this place with that understanding within your hearts, and will face the ramifications of your dishonorable and unrighteous actions within the circumstances in which you will assuredly meet in the hereafter. And there is as well nothing that I nor the great mystery can do about that either. If this is indeed perhaps my last message to the world, as I was promised if I ever made and released such a video, I want you all to know that in the end, when the dust has settled and your world has become ash, it is only love that will remain. Tlazotlanemi, tlazotlaja, tosepa mochipa.
Fuck the cops and fuck the press, burning money